The American Civil Liberties Union today kicked off a statewide campaign to tackle what it calls a disturbing trend.
Lieutenant Randall Cooper is a veteran officer in the San Jose Police Department. He's also an African American and knows what it's like to be stopped without cause by police. Knows that to some officers, just driving while black is a crime.
It could have been because I matched the description of someone that had been involved in a crime, or it could have been because I'm an African American male who drives a Cadillac.
It's called racial profiling. In Cooper's case, once he identified himself as a police officer, the officer who stopped him, this was not in San Jose, let him go.
There's a belief that law enforcement, not specific to the city of San Jose, but law enforcement may be making car stops based on race and gender and dress. That is improper, and that is in many cases illegal.
So today, San Jose's new police chief announced that his department will follow San Diego's lead as the second department in the country to voluntarily track the race and gender of every person on foot or in a car stopped by an officer in this city and the reason for the stop. That's about 120,000 a year, he says. Only about half of those result in a citation or arrest.
I think the San Jose Police Department profiles just like any other police department.
A certain number of the members of the community feel as though they are stopped because they might look a certain way or have a certain lifestyle.
African American officers say they tracked police stops for a short time about 8 years ago and that the results were disturbing.
We're 5% of the population. We found out that we're 15% of the stops. I don't know why those numbers would change. We haven't had any training or looked at the issue.
The chief says now his officers will go back to the police academy for lessons on probable cause and for sensitivity training.
Well, in order to understand the pressures that these troopers are under, you've got to understand what their job is. Their job is not, like everybody else on the force, to write traffic tickets and to enforce traffic safety laws. They say that, okay, but that's not what they're there for. And the records we saw made it very clear that these guys are out there for one reason, and that was to find drugs. And the way they do it is they go out on the road every day for 8 hours or 12 hours, however long they work. And they would try to pull over 8 to 10 cars a day and search them. And that was pretty much, from the internal reports that we saw, that was pretty much the expected, at least some of the supervisors expected the troopers to do 8 to 10 searches a day. And after a while, when you keep coming up empty-handed, your supervisors started getting all over you. And we saw comments like, 6 ounces of grass is not what's expected of you. You're supposed to be out there finding drugs and large quantities of money and guns, and you're not finding anything, so work on your techniques. And troopers have made a lot of stops, troopers have pulled a lot of people over, were given, glowing commendations from their supervisors. So they were under a lot of pressure. It was essentially volume. And that's one of the things that I saw in that Associated Press article that really caught my eye, was this quote from the sergeant who was on this team saying that the secret to this program is volume. He said, you got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find a prince. And I thought that was kind of a remarkable statement coming from a law enforcement officer. And I wondered who these frogs were. Who were the people they were kissing and throwing back, and what happened to them?
Governor Davis, come out!
How close to home has the issue gotten for me? Well, it's funny. I spend a lot of time telling other people's stories, and I very rarely tell my own. But probably one of the most powerful experiences for me was when I was in law school and driving with my family into Marin County. And Marin County is a relatively affluent and predominantly white community in the Bay Area. And my father is African American and my mother is white, and my sister and I were in the back seat. And we were followed by a patrol car for several blocks, and my father kept looking nervously in the rearview mirror, knowing that the officer was looking for an excuse to pull him over, and he was concentrating and trying to drive perfectly. And sure enough, the lights went on and we were pulled over, and the officer came up to my father's window and asked him whether he knew the passengers in the car. And he said, well, yes, of course I know the passengers in the car. Well, you know, they're riding with me of their own free will. He then asked what his relationship was to the people in the car, and asked whether my mother and my father were married and whether we were, in fact, their children, and spent several minutes interrogating us about our family status and familial relationships. And then finally let us go without a ticket or citation of any kind. And that is certainly not the only stop that I've experienced that has been race-related, but it's probably the one that I will always remember.
I'm going to ask everybody to come around and listen as we listen to Lauren Ware continue her comment. This is Sister Lauren Ware from the UFW. Say what? From the UFW.
Why would Governor Davis veto this bill? Because PORAC, an enormous police union in California, donated $200,000 to his campaign. That police union is one of the top 10 contributors to Governor Davis, and Governor Davis may very well fear that if he signs this bill, that he will lose the support of police unions, support he values so much.
Ain't no power like the power of the youth.